Hi there. In this lesson, we are going to discuss Virginia Woolf's essay, How Should One Read a Book? Complete name is Adeline Virginia Woolf. She was born in 1882 and died in 1941. She is a modernist writer. She is the champion of modernist writer. She is the daughter of Sir Leslie Stephen. Leslie Stephen was a famous Victorian critic. She was a member in the Bloomsbury group, or otherwise known as Bloomsbury set. It was a group of associated English writers, intellectuals, philosophers, and artists in the first half of the 20th century. They include Virginia Woolf, John Maynard Keynes, E.M. Forster, Lytton Strachey, etc. And they discussed a lot of current issues related with literature, art, painting, economics, such kind of topics they discussed in this Bloomsbury group. In 1912, she married Leonard Woolf and they started together Hogarth Press in 1917. Hogarth Press later published a lot of literary works in English language. She committed suicide by drowning herself in the river Ouse in 1941. So she died in 1941. Her famous novels are Voyage Out, published in 1915, Mrs. Dalloway in 1925, To the Lighthouse in 1927. Her short story collection is Monday or Tuesday, published in 1921, and essay collection is known as The Common Reader and also The Second Common Reader, 1925 and 1933 respectively. And she is the one of the modernist writers to introduce the stream of consciousness technique in novels. Read a book is an essay written by Woolf, first published in Yale Review in October 1926. Actually, it was a speech or a lecture. A speech was delivered on January 13th in 1926. Later, it was published in Yale Review. This essay is an intellectual piece of work in which Woolf talks about how she views reading a book as a personal experience for everyone. That means that she puts forward some suggestions, her own observations, and her own experiences. How should one read a book? And as well, you can see there is a note of interrogation at the end of this title. Here is a question mark, that is interrogation mark. And at the beginning of the essay, she talks about that question mark as well. We can look into a quote written by Vladimir Nabokov. The mind, the brain, the top of the tinkling spine is or should be the only instrument used upon a book. That means that a reader, a reader's thought should be the instrument on a reading. That means that the intellect of the reader plays on the book, no any other thing. The essay, I told you that she puts an question mark there. The note of interrogation at the end of her title, she says that even if she could answer for that question, that answer should only apply to her, not to others. എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞു കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ എങ്ങനെ ഒരാൾ ഒരു പുസ്തകം വായിക്കണം എന്നുള്ളത് പിന്നെ ഉത്തരം കണ്ടെത്തുകയാണെങ്കിൽ ആ ഉത്തരം എനിക്ക് മാത്രമാണ് എന്നാണ് വൂൾഫ് പറയുന്നത്. അവിടെ തന്നെ എ ലോട്ട് ഓഫ് വ്യൂസ്, റീഡിങ്ങിൽ ഒരുപാട് വ്യൂസും ഒബ്സർവേഷൻസും ഉണ്ട് എന്നുള്ളതാണ് അവർ പറയുന്നത്. Okay, then her advice for the readers. In reading, connected with in reading, she says that not to take any advice, that is her advice. Not to take any advice, that is her advice. The only advice that one person can give another about reading is to take no advice. That means to follow your own instinct, to use your own reason to come to your own conclusions. The readers have their own instinct in reading, and they can use their own reason, their own critical thinking, their own critical power to analyze a book such as, and to come to your own conclusion. The readers can find their own conclusion, they can find their own interpretations what they read. That is what she puts forward at the beginning of the essay. That is an advice. Woolf believed that the best advice always originated within the reader's instinct or from the reader's mind. And she says the Battle of Waterloo was certainly fought on a certain day. That means it has a certain day. It is a factual thing or historical event. But is Hamlet a better play than Lear? If we ask this question, nobody can say an answer whether Hamlet is good or King Lear is good. Such questions are foolish because each must decide that question for himself. For some readers, Hamlet may be a better play of Shakespeare. For others, King Lear may be the better play of Shakespeare. So, such kind of a question has no relevance in regarding reading. But if we ask about a historical event or a fact, there is an answer. If we ask a question that when was Waterloo happened, a person can answer for that question. But if we ask such a question in connection with literature and reading, nobody can answer this kind of a question that but is Hamlet a better play than Lear? Nobody can. And she says only a reader can value literature. She means the Waterloo War is only an historical fact, but literature cannot be valued in such a way that a historical event can be valued. And later she says that no one can make any restricts and control or rule in connection with reading. What a reader has to read or for how to read, when to read, such kind of control or restriction is not good for reading. She says that. And she says in the essay, to admit authorities, however heavily furred and gowned into our libraries and let them tell us how to read, what value to place upon what we read is to destroy the spirit of freedom, which is the breath of those sanctuaries. നമ്മളെ ലൈബ്രറികളിൽ കുറച്ച് നിയന്ത്രണങ്ങളും റെസ്ട്രിക്ഷൻസും ഒക്കെ കൊണ്ടുവന്നു കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ, അതാണ് ഈ സെന്റൻസ് കൊണ്ട് അർത്ഥമാക്കുന്നത്. കൊണ്ടുവന്നു കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ ലൈബ്രറി എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് റീഡേഴ്സിനുള്ള ഒരു സാങ്ച്വറിയാണ്. ആ സാങ്ച്വറിയിൽ ഒരുപാട് സ്വാതന്ത്ര്യമുണ്ട്. ആ സ്വാതന്ത്ര്യത്തിനെ തന്നെ നശിപ്പിക്കുന്നതായിരിക്കും ഒരു ലൈബ്രറിയിൽ ഇങ്ങനെ വായിക്കാൻ പാടുള്ളൂ, ഇന്നതേ വായിക്കാൻ പാടുള്ളൂ, നിങ്ങൾ ഇങ്ങനെ വായിക്കണം, ഇന്ന പുസ്തകത്തിന് ഇന്ന വാല്യൂ കൊടുക്കണം എന്ന് ആരെങ്കിലും പറഞ്ഞ് ചില റൂളുകളും ചില കൺട്രോളുകളും കൊണ്ടുവന്നു കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ ആ ലൈബ്രറിയുടെ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ലൈബ്രറികളുടെ ഫ്രീഡം എന്താണ്, സ്പിരിറ്റ് എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് അവിടുത്തെ ഈ ഫ്രീഡമാണ്. അപ്പോൾ ഈ ഫ്രീഡത്തിനാണ് അവർ നശിപ്പിക്കുന്നത്. Then everywhere else we may be bound by laws and conventions, but in library there we have none. In library there is no rule to be followed, there is no conventions to be followed, there is no control to be forced upon the readers, there is no restrictions to be readers. But on the road we may have traffic rules we may have to obey. On a holy place such as church, temple or mosque, there may have conventions and rules that we may have to follow. But in library, the readers don't have to follow any kind of such restrictions. That freedom is the spirit or life or spinal cord in the library. That means that the readers has the fullest freedom what to read, how to read, what value to put on literature or what she reads. Then she says that library is a collection of multitude of books. Whether it could be, there may be biography, history books, blue books, documents, novels, plays, poems, etc. But she says library is a place of multitudinous chaos. Multitudinous chaos means that a lot of things are there. A lot of ethnic writers will be there. Ethnicity, gender, age, life experiences are few of the innumerable characteristics that contribute to the overall interpretations of a reader. There are a lot of things in library. So she says that multitudinous chaos, that means that there is no order in a library. Okay, and a mixture of books where the reader has to find and bring an order in his reading. Says that each and every type of literature is unique. A lot of writers books will be there, nations may be different, their ethnicity may be different, age may be different, and agenda may be different, but we have to approach them without prejudices and blurred minds. If we approach a work or a literary piece with prejudiced mind or blurred minds, they will have some kind of problems. She comes to that point. She cautions against bringing baggage and preconceived notions. Preconceived notions means that prejudices to one's reading. She says each and every type of literature is unique and we have to keep away from our own prejudices with blurred and divided minds. In page number 51, she says this: be a reader, not a critic. How should one be a reader? Most commonly, we come to books with blurred and divided minds, asking of fiction that it shall be true. A reader asks fiction with a reader with a prejudiced mind thinks that asking of a fiction that it shall be true, of poetry that it shall be false, of biography that it shall be flattering. ഫിക്ഷൻ എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് അല്ലെ നോവലുകളിൽ പറഞ്ഞിരിക്കുന്ന കാര്യങ്ങളെല്ലാം സത്യമാണ്, പോയട്രിയിൽ പറഞ്ഞിരിക്കുന്ന കാര്യങ്ങളെല്ലാം തെറ്റാണ്, ഫാലസിയാണ്, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ബയോഗ്രഫിയിലുള്ള എല്ലാ കാര്യങ്ങളും ഒരു വ്യക്തിയുടെ ജീവിതത്തിനെ കുറിച്ച് നമ്മൾ പുകഴ്ത്തി പറയുന്നതാണ് എന്നൊക്കെയുള്ള ഒരു ബ്ലേഡ് ആൻഡ് പ്രിജുഡിസ്ഡ് മൈൻഡായിട്ട് നമ്മൾ ലൈബ്രറിയിലേക്ക് വന്നു കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ നമുക്ക് റീഡിംഗ് എന്ന് പറയുന്നതിനെ എൻജോയ് ചെയ്യാൻ കഴിയുകയില്ല എന്നാണ് വൂൾഫ് പറയുന്നത്. And we have to banish all such preconceptions when we read. അങ്ങനെയാണെങ്കിൽ if that would be an admirable beginning. When we should get an admirable beginning if we avoid, if we keep away from that kind of prejudices and divided minds or blurred and divided minds. That means that we have to keep away, we have to take off the prejudices when we enter into library, when we start reading a book. And later on, she continues to put forward her ideas that she says, be a reader, not a critic. And she says that do not dictate to your author, try to become him, be his fellow worker and accomplice. If you hang back and reserve and criticize at first, you are preventing yourself from getting the fullest possible value from what you read. But if you open your mind as widely as possible, then signs and hints of almost imperceptible fineness from the twist and turn of the first sentences will bring you into the presence of human being unlike any other. Steep yourself in this, acquaint yourself with this, and soon you will find that your author is giving you or attempting to giving you something far more definite. If you approach a work without having any prejudice in your mind, and if you open your mind in a fullest possible way, and that will be an admirable beginning, and you can understand what is the author is trying to giving you, and you will get a definite idea, you will get a far more definite idea what the author is trying to give you when you read a book without having prejudiced mind. Or if you become at the beginning itself a critic at first, you cannot get the fullest possible way what the author is trying to to give you. That is what she means here. And to open your eyes and to widen your ideas on reading, Woolf says, you become his friend. You become his friend. When you are kind with author, you will get what the author is giving you. That is something far more definite. The author is trying to give you a definite idea, a definite clear-cut idea or a concept. Okay. No author gives in a text an indefinite idea or concept, but author will give a reader a definite idea. That she says, if we keep away from the prejudiced mind and if we don't try to criticize at the beginning itself, that means that some readers may know the biography or the history of the writer. Then we will get some kind of prejudiced mind. He will write in such a way. His works may be in such a way. That is a prejudiced mind. If we approach in such a way, we cannot enjoy the reading. That is what she tries to say here. Reading and seeing. She puts an opinion about reading a novel. She says that if a novel has 32 chapters, that gives a formed and an under-controlled. As a builder, that means she compared a novel to a building. Okay, a novel has 32 chapters. It is structured and it is formed in 32 chapters. Okay, like a building. A building is structured and a building has a form. But novel is also structured. But novel is structured and formed with words. And she says, words are more impalpable than bricks. We can see, we can understand, we can comprehend what a building is built of. Building is built of bricks, but or a novel is built of structure formed out of words, and words are more impalpable. Impalpable means that very difficult to understand. That means a building can be seen by someone by his eyes, but reading is not as seeing. Reading cannot be compared to seeing, because reading is a complex process and reading is a longer process. Reading is a longer and more complicated process than seeing. She posits that words are impalpable, that means very difficult to understand. But building can be seen by anyone, bricks can be seen by anyone by the eyes, but words have such kind of a complexity in a novel. And then she goes to reading. She compares reading and writing. Reading is a longer and more complex process, but seeing is easy as and simple than seeing. This means that when we read, we will be disappointed if we see a complex word in the text. This is the nature of words, and words may have a lot of meaning. Words have its own complexity. So she compares reading and writing here. And if we want to understand the complexity of writing, if we read something written by an author, in that writing, if we want to understand that writing, that complexity of writing and the complexity of a writer, we have to write something, she says. We have to write something to experience the complexity of the writing. Okay, if we want to understand the complexity of a writer when he writes something, the reader also has to write. That she says. The readers have to write something in their own experience. Okay. We have to write something. She says the quickest way to understand to be a writer, to get a better understanding of a novel, you have to write a novel. Or write an impression that you had to make your own experiment with the dangers and the difficulties of words. Sword says words are more impalpable. If you try to reconstruct an impression, you will find that it breaks into 1,000 conflicting impressions. That she means that if a reader tries to write something about an impression, that then we will understand the difficulty of words to get to get the apt words for a sentence. Okay, you can see in the poem of Nizim Ezekiel, poet, lover, and birdwatcher. There he says that a poet waits for the apt words for writing a poem. And as well, Pablo Neruda says in his memoir that in word, also she says that a writer waits for words, apt words for his own writing. That is what she says that. Okay. Impressions, you will find that breaks into thousand conflicting impressions. And she says, make experiments with the words through the impressions. We have to make a lot of experiments with the words through these impressions. Okay, these impressions should be put into word and finally into a piece of writing. And she refers there, this is written, she talks about this experiment with the words that in page number 52, and she says that an impression that may be a tree shook, an electric light danced. The tone of the talk was comic but also tragic. A whole vision, an entire conception seemed contained in that moment. These kind of impressions, when we put into writing, there comes a lot of thousand kinds of conflicting confusions in the writer's mind. And she refers to three authors: Daniel Defoe, Jane Austen, and Thomas Hardy. If a reader reads the opening pages of these great writers, such as these three referred, you will be better able to appreciate their mastery in writing. If we arrange them, we can realize that we are living in a different world. That means these authors have created different worlds through their sentences, through their words, through their writings. She takes the example of these authors and poses that they have created different world of Daniel Defoe created the world of adventure of Robinson Crusoe. Jane Austen wrote about the domestic scenery, the human relationship, women relationship, mother-daughter relationship, such as in her novels, and human relationship and wild characters of man, written by Thomas Hardy in Mayor of Casterbridge, such novels, and they have created their own world. We will get a different world when we read the novels or the writings of such of these great writers. To read a novel is a difficult and complex art, and you must be capable not only of great fineness of perception, but of great boldness of imagination. You should have boldness, great imagination, fineness of perception. If you are going to make use of all that novelist, the great artist gives you. That means the greatest artist never confuses us. Novels, we get good imagination, boldness of imagination, or these greatest writers have used boldness of imagination, fineness of perception, such as, and the greatest artist never confuses us. They have made their own world. And she says some books on the shelf are not great works at all, as well as writers are not great artists, in paragraph number 1 of page number 53. And she refers here to the biographies and letters and memoirs. Okay. She talks about some lesser writers are there who never give a definite idea. Great artist always gives a reader a definite idea or a definite concept through their writing. They never confuses the reader. But some lesser writers, she says, they never give a definite idea. Sometimes they confuse the reader and give different kinds of reality in the same text. That is what she says. Biographies and letters and memoirs, she says, reading biographies and memoirs to throw some light on literature, or to become familiar with famous people, or to become familiar with the lives of great men. Reading biography, when we read biography, we will get some idea about famous people, or knowledge about famous people, or to become familiar with the lives of great men. and she takes a lot of examples in this text itself, in this essay itself, about the biographies of such great personalities. And she says, to read a novel is a complex process. It is very difficult art. And reading biographies and memoirs to throw some light. You can read biographies to get some light on literature, to become familiar with famous people, or to become familiar with lives of great men. To exercise the imagination, she argues, is itself a special skill. That means that writing biography is very easy task, but writing a novel is not an easy task. That is what she says, that to exercise the imagination, where we can see imagination in imagination, novels will be full of imagination. To get some imagination, or to have an imagination, she argues, it needs, or it is itself a special skill. Read biographies, letters and memoirs to throw some lights on literature, to become familiar with famous personalities in the history in the world. That might give some knowledge and information about such people. Read it, refresh and exercise our own creative powers. We can read the biographies and memoirs and letters to get our own creative powers, or to be motivated in life and to reach in success. We can read these biographies. But if you want to get such an imagination, these imaginations are, we can see in the great novelist, in the novels of great novelists, then you have to read novels, not biographies. And two aims of reading biographies and memoirs, she says, to get some light on literature, to become familiar with famous personalities in the history in the world. That might give some knowledge and information about such people. And to refresh and exercise our own creative powers. We can read. She says that reading biographies, but also we can read such books with another aim, which is the such books, biographies and letters and memoir, which is that aim not to throw light on literature, not to become familiar with famous people, but to refresh and exercise our own creative powers. These are the two aims of reading biographies. Okay, I have given here. You can look here. One is to get some light on literature, to become familiar with famous personalities in the history in the world. That might have give some knowledge and information about such people. Then second one is to refresh and exercise our own creative powers. We can read biographies for these two aims, with two aims. These are questions that press upon us when we read lives and letters, and we must answer them for ourselves. For nothing can be more fatal than to be guided by the preferences of others in a matter of so personal, she says in the text. But also, we can read such books with another aim. This is the aim that she talks about. She says any library includes these kinds of biographies. The greater part of any library, nothing but the record of such fleeting moments in the lives of men. What is the fleeting moments in the lives of the biographies of these such personalities? Every literature has its own rubbish heap. She refers this rubbish heap as these biographies and a lot of these kinds of works about the lives of men. Okay, means rubbish heap means that waste. Okay, she continues to say that such biographies and such writers, those writers who write biographies, had not the artist's power of mastering and eliminating. That means that they have no such a great imagination. Those who write biographies, that means that biographies only need the factual things that they experience in their life. Writing biography is a simple process, but writing a novel is a complex process. They could not tell the whole truth even about their own lives. Facts are all that they can offer. These writers, those biographies, those memoirs, those letters, or those writers, such writers can only offer these facts. Facts are very inferior form of fiction. Facts cannot be compared to imagination. That is what she says. Facts never can be compared with imagination, because imagination is a superior thing than facts. In novels, we can see these kinds of imagination. Libraries are filled with such rubbish heap of biographies and letters. These writers sometimes write about only about facts that won't give us insight. Such writers disfigure the story, and facts are very inferior form of fiction. Biographies had not the artist's power of mastering and eliminating. She says that if we take her another essay, Modern Fiction, by Woolf, written in 1921, she criticizes, whom does she criticize? H.G. Wells, Arnold Bennett, and John Galsworthy, of writing about unimportant things and call them as materialists, because these writers, she calls these writers as materialist in Modern Fiction. Modern Fiction is another essay of Woolf, where she analyzes the novels and fiction and narrative techniques such as, okay, then she says these writers are materialists because they have written only about facts. There is no imagination in their writing. That is her argument in the essay. She criticizes these writers. In the same essay, Modern Fiction, she praises some other writers. Who are they? She praises them as spiritualists. Who are the spiritualists according to Woolf? She praises several other authors for their innovation in writing novels, innovation and experiments with writing novels. One is James Joyce. James Joyce introduced, or James Joyce experimented with the technique that is known as stream of consciousness, and a lot of epiphanies are there in his novels. Who Woolf says writes what interests and moves him. She says that James Joyce has innovated the writing, the genre called novel, using a lot of modern innovations in his writings. Then she praises Thomas Hardy, Joseph Conrad, William Henry Hudson, James Joyce, and then Chekhov, because of these writers have innovated their writing, and she calls them as spiritualist. Okay, but those who, when we compare those materialist writers have written only about facts.